Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 16. Kit is very thirsty. He gives the Pigwidgeons justice, tempered with mercy, his views upon capital punishment, the Garden of Silence. Other rulers before the crowning of Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons, have been kept prisoners in the interests of their people. Indeed, it is doubtful if anyone could remain a monarch if he were as free as his subjects. The Queen of the Bees is at once the best served and the most cruelly enslaved of any royal person. If she tried to be free of her people's devotion and tyrannies, they would destroy her. Even the most independent kings are hedged in by observances and attendants and officers of state to such a degree that they may hardly sneeze without somebody rushing forwards to save them the trouble of doing it for themselves. But the Queen of the Fairies is, as everyone knows, different from all human rulers, because no one ever saw her seated on a throne, not though she is the Queen of Queens. She is queen only for the reason that she rules her own river. She has won the hearts of her subjects and her vassal queens, even though they are not by any means all quite good, because she knows the only way to be happy is to love all things that live, and to set the river free to flow through their hearts and their houses and their gardens and their cherry trees. But our Kit did not think much about such things. He was fully occupied with these two predicaments. He had got to be a king as best he could, and yet he did so long to go home. He once broke into terrible tears with his face in his Prime Minister's shaggy neck. Then Trystie licked his face all over and assured him that the Queen would find some means of getting his recorder to him. But for the dog, he would have broken his heart altogether, I think. He was really a brave boy, although he had been getting rather boastful. You would have thought Kit felt afraid when he found the ladder was gone. Yet he did not, because he was angry. "It's a beastly, beastly shame, Trystie," he cried, angrily stamping his feet, "and I don't care who hears me say it. I want them all to know that they are beasts, and ought to be put in prison." This was a bad beginning for both king and people. But no one took any notice at all of Kit's remarks, so fiercely were they all snoggling. Certainly nothing could be done to get away at present, and, as they were both very tired, they sat down on the floor to think. The chief and immediate distress was thirst, and Trystie was suffering from it as much as Kit. The boy shouted at the top of his voice, hoping to bring someone. He called Crickety, he called the secretaries of state, he tried to command attendance from caitiff lords, sorry varlets, pampered minions, cat-lapping poltroons, rascally sycophants. He pronounced this word sycophants, having only read it, and even from lick-spitlers and landlubbers, but all without the desired effect. The only answers he seemed to get were distant rumbling sounds like thunder. They came nearer and nearer, while noises of splitting and crashing shook the place to its foundations. They grew till they roared like mountain torrents, with grinding rocks and uptorn trees swept before them. The walls of the great chamber gleamed dully and unsteadily. The floor itself began to sway and to heave, so that the king and his prime minister had to hold on to each other. Then other noises assailed their ears, because the whole population now snoggled and snored like a cittiful of aldermanic pigs. The floor went up and down in solid waves, the walls doubled up and straightened out again, the domed roof seemed to burst and crumple up like an airball, and then stretch itself out into a hideous grin. The crashing and snoring got even more frightful, because many Pigwidgeons seemed to come awake and added uproars of laughter to the turmoil, and din. Kit told Curdle he was beginning to think about being afraid. But the good dog said to him loud enough to be heard above all the noise, "Nothing to be afraid of, Master Kit. Don't forget it's only Gallybird's hole, and the wind is knocking the old tree about and the rain is rushing and falling about the leaves and branches. The rest is silly shockletricks, that's all." Then things were quieter. King and Prime Minister lay down and fell fast asleep in each other's arms. After a good sleep, Kit was wakened by Trystie advising him, if he was rested, to go and sit on the throne, because the spiders were beginning to bring in the lanterns again, and the people might be angry if they found he wasn't spiked there. So he climbed up into it, and, as it was soft and warm, he had another long sleep. The day that followed would have been entertaining enough but for the crookedness of everything. The apples they were given kept them from being quite famished, though the thirst was dreadful. Kit tried the plan of asking for instead of demanding something to drink. Crickety, who, being Home Secretary, had the domestic management in his hands, was puzzled at the strange request, and ordered a flunky-monkapig to bring some oak apples and baked broom pods and things like cracknel biscuits. These did not offer much refreshment, and Kit explained that they wanted water. And, by my halidom, he added, I will have it. There's no such thing, gracious sire, as water. Never was, said the creature, now in a fresh uniform of yellow stripes, red buttons, and the breastplate brightly polished, and if there is, it's poison. Have a suck at my bullseye. At that very moment Curdie said he could distinctly smell sweet, running water somewhere, and, curiously, at that very moment, Cricketus Buttons turned pale, as he looked towards the archway they all feared, and said hoarsely, the creaky cart, again. Which of us this time? Kit could never understand how they managed to get through the terrible long day that followed. Beyond all else, one thing stands out in his memory most clearly: the awful thirst. It seemed to be all part of his longing to get back home to his mother's arms, to Trystie's help over his lessons, to Jonah's and the sheep. But for Curdie's patient watching of him and encouraging him with wise words of sympathy whenever they were needed, I doubt if he could have lived through it. Indeed, Curdie succeeded so well that it was possible for Kit, in spite of the thirst and the hateful people, to play the king. He was determined to make his subjects good, whether they liked it or not. In this unwise policy Curdie was not much clearer-headed than his royal master, because you can't make anybody good. Even the mighty queen couldn't if she would. You see, if you force a person to be good, you only make him into a machine. Kit understood this before he got home, and now explains it to me. If, he said, the queen made things be good, they would never think what to do, and would be windmills. Then she couldn't be queen any more and would have to undo all her magic. But, though you can't make anything good by beating it, I am sure you can make it behave better, and at any rate that's pleasanter for the people who have to do the beating. The Pigwidgeons behaved shockingly. They were constantly ill-treating one another, snatching food away, tripping up, pulling tails and ears. They would break off each other's toes and gobble them up. They loved backbiting. They would try to google their own brother's eyes. Several would conspire and plot tricks against some particular Pigwidgeon, while each one in the plot would be contriving how he could best hurt his co-conspirator. So the din of yelling laughter and tearless howls lasted without intermission. Kit and Curdie had their hands and teeth full, you may be sure. So severe was their ruling that, little by little, some sort of peace seemed to reign. The Pigwidgeons grew quite afraid of the laws which Kit quickly made. They became abject and cringing, but even greedier and hatefuler to look at. Kit's laws were these. 1. Everyone who hurts anyone shall be hanged by his feet as long as he stops there, the spiders to do this execution. 2. Everyone who is bit in the back or broke in the toes shall be hanged up too, because he does the same as he is done by when he gets a chance. 3. Googling is a shocking crime. Everyone caught in the act or not, shall be hanged by the head and cut down again just in time. 4. All conspirators shall be bitten by the Prime Minister wherever and whenever his right honourable lordship chooses. 5. Because the creaky cart is a shockle trick, anybody shock-led by it shall be banished into the Garden of Silence. Kit found law number 5, the best deterrent to crime. The Pigwidgeons liked noise, because it was only in moments of silence that they heard the creaky cart. So they thought it belonged to something they called silence, something terrible and unknown beyond the dreaded doorway. Curdie greatly preferred law number 4. He said anybody with teeth could appreciate it. What with the fear of Lord Curdie's teeth and the fear of silence, the Pigwidgeons really began to behave a little better. Kit thought he was getting on finely, almost as if he was born to be a king. He tempered his severity with mercy, and took good care that all those he hanged were noosed and brought down again before it was too late. He gives me a funny reason for this. Once when he was about 6 years old, Jonas, who, among his other accomplishments, used to be an ardent fisherman, had told him that you may go on catching perch as fast as you like, so long as a hooked fish does not wriggle off again and fall back into the water, but that after such an accident you will not get another bite all that day. Jonas said, "Them that is caught proper don't he never go back to tell the sad news, but him that jumps off, he ups and gives warning to t'others, and they don't he go no more after they fleshpots with fishhooks inside of 'em like." Kit remembered this, he told me, when he saw the Pigwidgeons hanging up, because somehow they reminded him of the rows of smoked herrings he had seen hanging in a fishmonger's shop at Pixhaven. He thought if he kept his criminals hanging till they were quite dead, they would not tell the others what it felt like, and would be wasted. But if they were cut down in time and sent home, they would warn the others whose turn hadn't come that they'd better not be hanged, because it was terrible stretchy and choky. I cannot help thinking the suggestion a good one for our own upholders of capital punishment. About the middle of that long day, Kit felt so tired of sitting on the throne that he determined to take the risk of letting the people see he was not impaled upon the skewer as King Parsnip had been. The result was that the ministers of state, whose duty it was of course to attend the throne, trembled and turned so pale that they looked like things floured and ready for the frying pan. They stopped talking and sniggling and were so quiet that many of them thought they must be dead. The quiet that began at the foot of the throne rapidly spread through the crowd of people filling the vast domed room. Kit says it was like a pebble dropped into a pond and waves of quiet spreading all over to the edges. The Pigwidgeons must have been convinced that their king was a wizard. Thereafter they always left a space around him and Curdie, greatly to their relief. Most particularly were the king and prime minister glad to have Crickety at a little distance, because his peppermint breath and his monotonous shifting of the bull's eye from cheek to cheek were becoming very exasperating. Now that Kit and Curdie could do as they liked, they set about exploring their kingdom, chiefly with a view to discovering where the ladder was kept, but also because of the boy's curious spirit which always made him want to know about everything. As they went along, however, the crowd making way for them everywhere, Lord Curdie fell behind and hung his shaggy head very sadly. Somehow he could not get as near his little master as he was accustomed. He realized that Kit was strutting about, no longer as if he were playing a part he had to play, but rather as if he thought he was really a very mighty boy. Curdie looked steadfastly up at the back of his royal master's head, possibly wondering whether his Sunday straw hat would not have to go to little Davy now. Nowhere could they find the ladder, indeed there was nowhere high enough for it to stand except under the dome, and no passage straight enough for it to lie in. They went through every archway and every door but the one on which was written the Garden of Silence. Pigwidgeons in crowds confronted them everywhere and made way, but no sign was there of any ladder. The one door they wanted most to go through was the door of silence. Kit hammered at its heavy oak, but his little plump fists made no noise. Curdie leaped and barked, but the only effect was a sound like falling rain and a fresh silence of the people. Then Kit heard the music of running water and it made him thirstier than ever. He put his ear down on the door, his eyes looking very big and his lips parched with thirst. There was no keyhole. He heard the gentlest singing, and thinks the words were these, though he couldn't understand them at all. Brave birds beat their wings to my singing, in time with my song the wave breaks, and harebells and sheep-bells go ringing, while heather its tinkle-tongue shakes. From dark rocks my river comes leaping, and free, like a lion, must roar. In sunlight my river lies sleeping, or laps on the rush-guarded shore. Cling-clang songs ring out of my smithy, when courage is welded with right, and gnomes, ringing blows on my stithy, forge stars for the sorrowful night. Though, as I say, Kit was not old or wise enough to understand, indeed I doubt if even I am, what the song meant. He, of course, knew it was all about sweet and true meanings, so that he now felt much less thirsty, but wondered why the Pigwidgeons so greatly dreaded the door and all that was beyond it. It was a happy thing for both boy and dog to have come so near the other side, a better thing perhaps than if they had found the ladder. But it made Kit cry some bitter tears, again a better thing also than if he had been so self-content as to feel no need to cry. I think the tears washed out of our brave boy's heart some of the boastfulness, because, after his cry, Kit says, Curdie got close up to him again, and would have his ears pulled. Again I have to point out that days and hours count for little in Fairyland. It is quite impossible to determine what length of time, how many days or hours, Kit spent with the Pigwidgeons. No sun shone whereby to guess the time. It was long enough, however, for both boy and dog to suffer very seriously in bodily health. The food was altogether insufficient and the lack of water was making them both irritable. Curdie never at any time had fat to spare, but Kit generally was plump and rosy and beaming to all the world with his happy heart within. Now, however, he soon grew pale and thin, and Curdie was so gaunt that his bones could be almost seen through his shaggy hair, and his eyes were sunk. When he had to show his teeth in an official capacity, he did so with more temper than was natural to him, and looked fierce and angry. He was constantly yelping his absurd proverbs at the people, though of course they could not appreciate the little jokes hidden in the snarls to keep his temper within bounds. While there's life, there's rope, he once said, suddenly dropping his head and tongue on one side, as if choked. Another was, never too late to end. Kit tells me that Curdie sat down to utter this threat, as if suddenly remembering his own shortcoming and trying to conceal the fact that his natural end was too far gone for mending. Anyhow, Kit became sterner with wrongdoers, and began to wonder if he ought to show any mercy to those whom he hanged. But he still hated to be unkind. Indeed, from the first he always had the criminals' necks carefully padded with moss before the noose was slipped, so that the cord should not hurt much. All things considered, it was high time for something to happen if they were to get home again. Fortunately, the Queen was not far away. I do not think she ever is. But, all the same, Gallybird's hole was awful. There are some places into which the Queen of the Fairies cannot always go even when she is most needed there. Gallybird's hole was one of them. End of this chapter.